Yeah, that's LinkedIn quiz, Johnson, for you. I remember interviewing Dennis Bovell. He was here for Back to Africa Festival that my professor organized about Congo. Then he was just from Ivory Coast finishing Alpha Blondy's album, Mystic Power. He said many things that he worked with you, a great work. Even he gave me a song that you did in Paris together. He accompanied you to Paris. A live show. I remember he gave me that song.
Well, Dennis Bovell's dub band, the Dennis Bovell dub band, they've been my backing band since 1982.
Yeah, that's what he said.
You know, we've been working together, and they're still my backing band.
That's true. That's what he said. Yeah, he's an amazing man. I missed him since he came here and he went back. But he's a good sound engineer, music producer, and a singer for that matter. That's Limpton Kwesi Johnson for you, Limpton. Then LKJ in dub, bringing poetry to dub music to inspire the reggae DJs. Why? How did you? Let me tell you why. How did you bring poetry and then because you coil the word poetry dub poetry. Now, how did you bring poetry to dub music?
Well, I always heard a bass line. Mm-hmm. So, if I'm writing a poem, the rhythm, the rhythmic structure of the line or of the poem sounded like a bass line. So, whenever I was making a record, the bass line would be organic to the very structure of the language I was using in the poetry. Mm-hmm. So for me, everything begins with the bass.
Everything begins with the bass. You listen to Capital Radio 100.4, the sound of a new generation. This is Papa Jamz with LKJ, the living legend.
We're marching out the old towards the new century, armed with the new technology. We're getting more and more productivity. Some say things looking up for prosperity. But if everyone gon' get a share this time, whole mentality must get left behind. We want the shorter working day, give it the shorter working week. Longer holiday, we need peace and pay. More time for leisure, more time for pleasure, more time for edification, more time for recreation, more time for contemplate, more time for ruminate, more time. We need more time, doing more time.
Yeah, and we are having more time for interviews also because the legend is in the house. That's LKJ, Limpton Kwesi Johnson, Chelo Gambia. He is a living legend. Catch him tonight at the Ebujan Theatre, the Mboka Festival. It's a poetry night. He's there. Tickets are only $300. And this is Capital Radio 100.4, the sound of a new generation. Papa Jamz with LKJ. This afternoon, LKJ, you said yes. The reason you coined the word dub poetry and you introduced dub poetry is the bass line was speaking poetry.
Yes, that was part of my way into poetry. Mm-hmm. But when I coined the term dub poetry, I wasn't really talking about what I do. Mm-hmm. I was talking about the art of the reggae DJs like Big Youth and so on, and those guys, early pioneers. It's just that the term stuck to me because there were some guys in Jamaica, poets in Jamaica, who were part of a new movement of orality in Caribbean poetry, who were working within the reggae tradition, and they call themselves dub poets, using the term that I had coined to describe the reggae DJs. I mean, I'm talking about people like Mikey Smith, Oko Nura, Jean Binta Breeze, and so on. What I actually called my own work was reggae poetry, but it was based around the bass line because I was interested in the relation between the music in language and the language of music and how they work together. And that's how I evolved my style of poetry, you know. But, Papa, I must tell you this. Nearly every single one of my reggae recordings began life as poems published in book form or in magazines before they became reggae recordings. So I was kind of straddling both the literary world and the world of popular music.
Okay. Let me try to understand here, Mr. Johnson. If you
Call me Linton, man.
Linton, yeah. Okay. Okay, Linton. Let me understand here something. You call this word dub poetry. Today we would have seen many dub poets, but if you see it, the reggae DJs would have used dub poetry as a source of inspiration for them to have greater work. But today, if you look at what they call DJing, you know, the likes of Roy, you said here, you Roy, you listen to those DJs taking extended dubs of other artists, making some nice this thing. But today, if you look at what they call dancehall music today, the reggae DJs is talking of more glamour, who drink the most Hennessy, who can ride the most beautiful girls. It's all about vanity. It moves from more like it's unfashionable. You know, it's all about material gain, worldly gain. There's nothing educating.
And there's not much music, and there's not much reggae in it anymore. Anyway, the rhythms are different.
Good. How did you, if you look at as a poet and somebody who admires reggae music, using reggae music to carry your message, reggae was known to be a music of revolution, a music of uplifting. Right? Now all those purpose is defeated when even it comes in terms of DJing.
Well, it's part of the whole revolution of the spoken word in popular music. It began with hip hop and rap in America. And these guys in Jamaica would kind of go down the same road, you know, with the emphasis on the consumerist ethos of the 21st century, you know, instant gratification and this worshipping of material goods and so on. So that has influenced the youth. But I'm very happy to see that in Jamaica there's a reggae revival going on right now. And it's you know, I think the most prominent exponent of that right now is Chronix.
Chronix, yes.
And everybody loves Chronix. And it's not just Chronix alone. There are other people doing that.
Jackie O, Torres.
Yes, in that style. Taurus Riley, yeah. So I'm not despondent. I'm hopeful, you know, because what goes around comes around. And there's a Rasta revival amongst the youth of Jamaica today, not so much maybe spiritually, but at least culturally, in terms of what is valued. They're using reggae music as a vehicle of social commentary and of social protest, and as a voice for those people who are marginalized, who themselves have no voice at all. So yes, I understand what you're saying about that dancehall culture, which is quite nihilistic in some ways and very negative in other ways. The way it demeans women and sexuality and all the rest of it. But you know, you find the same thing in hip-hop music in the United States of America. I think it's a global phenomenon.
Okay, still with reggae music, you did a great work. You mentioned here Richard Branson, Virgin Records, you work with Universal Records, Island Records. Most of these international respectable companies, you worked with them all, because I can see making...
I work with them, but you know, after Island Records, after I made...
I'm coming here. I want to know something here.
Okay, sorry.
Because you looking at making history, forces of victory, base culture, independence, intervention, LKJ in dub. There are some works that you did with Island Records, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, but after they said Island deleted some of your work, I don't know, something of that nature.
No,
what happened?
They kept on putting out compilations, you know, old records with repackaged and all of that. But no, by 1982, I'd set up my own label, LKJ Records. And we put out a record by Mikey Smith called Me Can't Believe It, which is poetry. But then I didn't really get the label going until about 1991. And I was preaching autonomy, which is what Marcus Garvey preached all his life, black autonomy. We must have our own thing.
Independence.
Independent intervention. So LKJ Records was my independent intervention, and everything I've done since that have been on my label. Even though they may be distributed by Universal or Sony or whoever, I exercise a measure of independence, of autonomy, by having my own record label, LKJ Records. I have put out record by John Kapai, I've put out records by Jean Binter Breeze, Steve Gregory, Dennis Bovell. It's really a very, very small label, but it affords me a measure of independence that I wouldn't have otherwise. A record company can't come and tell me what to do. I do what I want to do, and they can distribute it or whatever they want to do with it, but I deal with the publishing side and so on. But since 1991, I've put out More Time, I've put out Things and Times, LKJ in Dub Volume 2 and 3, and other recordings by a few people on my label. It's a labor of love more than anything else. But the main thing, it gives me autonomy, and I think autonomy is very, very important.
Self-reliance. I think it's self-reliance.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, we go back to activism, poetry, the message that you send to fight social injustice. 1981, the Brixton riot, 13 dead, 26 get injured, and you were in the forefront of that. What triggered it? What incident happened?
Well, for many years, since I was a teenager, it was apparent to me and the black youth of my generation that the police, especially the Metropolitan Police Force in London, had declared war against the black youth of my generation. And there were many confrontations with the police because as youth, as young people, we were not prepared to put up with the things our parents did. And we fought back. And there were always, small mini riots and so on. But 1981, what happened in 1981 was that some racists, some fascists, firebombed a party that a 16-year-old girl was celebrating, a girl of Jamaican parents called Yvonne Ruddock. And there was a fire, and 13 young children died in that fire. 26 were seriously injured. We call that the New Cross Massacre. It happened in a place called New Cross. That was in January of 1981. And then in April of 1981, the police started an operation in Brixton called Operation Swamp 81, where they went about harassing and intimidating black people going about their everyday lawful business. Now all this bitterness and all this anger and all the mini riots that we had in the period leading up to 81 culminated in the Brixton riots. And those riots spread all over the country, to Manchester, to Liverpool, to every major inner city area in England. We had an uprising. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. We'd been putting up with too much for too long, and we said, well, this is not going to happen anymore, and that's why we had this riot. And I made a couple of wrote some poems about it. One of them called "The Great Insurrection." It goes like this. It was in April 1981, down in the ghetto of Brixton, that the Babylon them caused such a friction that it bring about a great insurrection. And it spread all over the nation. It was truly an historical occasion. It was event of the year, and I wish I had been there when we run riot all over Brixton, when we mash up plenty police van, when we mash up the Wicked One plan, when we mash up the Swamp 81, to make the ruler them understand that we not take no more of them oppression. And when me check out the ghetto grapevine, to find out all I could have find, every rebel just a revel in them story. Them a talk about the power and the glory. Them a talk about the burning and the looting. Them a talk about the smashing and the grabbing. Them a tell me about the vanquish and the victory. Them said the Babylon them went too far. So what? We had was for born to care. And 1 and 2 innocent get mar. But what? Now so it got some time in a war in star. Now so it got some time in a war. Them say we burn down the judge, we could have burned the landlord. We burn down the judge, we never burn the landlord. When we run riot all over Brixton, when we mash up plenty police van, when we mash up the wicked one plan, when we mash up the swamp 81. Them say we command their car and we gather ammunition. We build a barricade and the wicked catch afraid. We send out, we scout, we go find them whereabout. Then we farm up, we posse and we make we raid. We allow them run go and go plan counter action. But the plastic bullet and the water cannon will bring a blam blam, will bring a blam blam. Never mind scar man, will bring a blam blam. And when I say never mind scar man, I'm referring to Lord Scarman, who was appointed by the government to conduct inquiry into the causes of the riots.
Was he a police officer?
No, Lord Scarman. He was one of the law lords, and he made some recommendations and so on and so forth. But it was a bit of a whitewash, really. But the Brixton riot was a watershed moment, and the New Cross fire was a watershed moment because after the New Cross fire happened, the black communities came together and formed the New Cross Massacre Action Committee and mobilized 20,000 people marching through the streets of London on the 2nd of March 1981. And that day was known as the Black People's Day of Action. It was a watershed moment because it made the British state sit up and take note of the fact that we had some power and we could mobilize that power.
And you were at the forefront.
I was a part of the movement. I was a part of the New Cross Massacre Action Committee, and I was one of the people who helped to organize the march, and I went around mobilizing people for that Black People's Day of Action. Yes, I was involved, very much so.
Yeah, we listen to that song. We come back 100.4 Capital Radio. I'm here with the living legend, Limton Kwesi Johnson. He will be tonight at the Ebujan Theatre. Ticket is $300. He's here for the Mboka Festival. Yes.
Wondering if I could shape this passion just as I wanted in solid fire. I was wondering if the strange combustion of my days, the tension of the world inside of me, and the strength of my heart were enough.
Yes, 100.4, the sound of a new generation. We are still in the program. Mr. Limton Kwesi Johnson, why you said I call you Limton?
Linton.
Yes. Okay, Linton. Blair Peach. You made a song for Blair Peach, Reggae Peach. Tell me something about this man also, because he was an activist also who died in the struggle.
Yes, Reggae Peach is not really a great poem. In fact, it's not even a good poem, but I felt it was important at the time to record the fact that this man who was beaten to death by the British paramilitary police, that his death had significance not only for the people who believe in freedom and justice, it had significance for black people, because Blair Peach was born in New Zealand, and he came to England, became involved in the anti-fascist movement, and he was a member of the Anti-Nazi League, an organization of mostly white left-wingers who were organizing against the rise of fascism in England. And he was involved in a demonstration in a place called Southall, where there are a lot of people from the Asian subcontinent, Pakistanis, Indians. And there was a group of fascist National Front people confronted on that demonstration. So it was the National Front versus the Anti-Nazi League. And the Special Patrol Group, for reasons best known to themselves, beat Blair Peach and killed him.
Wondering if I could shape this passion just as I wanted in solid fire. I was wondering if the strange combustion of my days, the tension of the world inside of me, and the strength of my heart were enough. I was wondering if I could stand as tall while the tide of the sea rose and fell, if the sky would recede as I
100.4 Capital Radio. We are back and I'm here with Linton Kwesi Johnson. Linton, this poem, tell me something about this one.
This is the first and only poem that I've ever recorded that I didn't write. I wrote the music, but I didn't write the words. The words are by a Guyanese poet, a poet from Guyana, called Martin Carter. And he's one of my favorite poets. He was, for me, his poems, his book of poems, Poems of Resistance, was for me political poetry par excellence. And I found him a great inspiration. This particular poem, Poems of Shape and Motion, are really not so much political verse, but poems about the human condition and about the relationship between artistic expression and life. And I found it very moving and very profound, and I thought, let me put my stamp on it. So I wrote some music and did a reggae version of it.
And how when you take this poem, are you ready to take another poem from him? Because you said he's somebody that you like his poems. Or you're going to stop from this one?
I'll stop from this one. Yes, that was special. That was a very special
Special one
thing.
for you.
Oh, yeah, one off. Oh, yeah.